Welcome to On Air with Kash. Our guest today is an actress, singer, songwriter, and pianist. You've seen her in Curb Your Enthusiasm, Criminal Minds, Mother's Day, and NCIS. She's the co-host of the podcast, The Lucy and Annabelle Show. Her new book, Remember Me as Human, is available March 12th. Please welcome Lucy Walsh.
Hello, Cash.
Lucy, I'm really excited about this interview. I know we've met a while back. You were performing, and I feel like that was a time when I was making some changes and looking at your story. I feel like you were going through some new stuff. So I feel like our worlds, we did have similar upbringings, and I've followed your journey as well, too, with your music, your movies, now with your new book, your podcast. So really excited to have this conversation with you.
I am too. You and I have known each other for a long time, actually. I met you like 20 years ago, if you remember. We've been kind of like circling around each other in the same friend groups. And
Yes.
I've always just known you, but you and I have never gotten a chance to talk and get to know each other. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. It's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
A long time coming, and I do believe things go full circle. One of the main things I think that you and I really had in common was we do come from musical family backgrounds, but for some
Yeah.
reason, films and movies were just always in us. And I don't know if, I mean, I definitely felt people were, and I love music. For whatever reason, it just didn't resonate with me the way that it did with you. Where just for me, I always understood things more cinematically, like understood where a song would go in good with a movie, or I was all about like making the scene or creating the character. But you know, in music is something that you're extremely, I mean, I don't have to tell you, I mean, you've done the national anthem for President Clinton and Maria Shriver. I mean, you've performed with, you know, our mutual friend, Ashley Simpson, and many other, Maroon 5 you've toured with. So, I mean, you've had an outstanding career doing that, but film has always been your number one love, or acting, I should say.
Yes. How did you know that?
I'm good. I do my research.
Into my soul. Yes. Yeah, I've always felt a bit guilty saying that music isn't as important to me as acting because I just feel like I'm taking it for granted, but I'm not. I've just always really known acting to be my number one love, but music has always, like you said, just been a part of my family and was just very natural for me to fall into being a professional musician along with everything else. And I'm sure you find this, you just said it as well. It all goes hand in hand. It's all just part of being a performer if you have those musical abilities as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel because with me, I didn't, not like I didn't understand music, but it was like I felt like I didn't really understand a lot of the family dynamics I had until it was around the time I was 8. And, you know, before that, I remember certain family members of mine, but I just really felt like my world kind of turned a bit upside down because when I was around 8, I started going to this private school that my aunt's son was at. So everyone already knew this. So for me, it was like I was just starting to understand who Elvis was and what
Mhm.
that was all about. And when that happened, it was right when my cousin marries Michael Jackson. And I felt like beginning there, people only like they didn't really want to know me, or it was just kind of like they always saw me as a connection to someone. At that time, I was just drawing, I was building stuff with blocks. But then at that time, I felt this pressure to like at 8 years old, you had to know how to answer certain questions or what to say to people. And so so I got a taste of what the music industry was like. And then just even being thrust into a situation like that where, even it's like I can't just go on like a play date being 8 years old and just doing normal stuff without worrying about, a parent asking me a question or having an agenda or trying to push a kid on me or something for their own thing. Aside from that, I mean, I grew up in Sherman Oaks. I mean, my dad's in the music industry too. He was actually the VP of Elvis Presley Enterprises in the 90s and director of music publishing. Up until he retired. So we lived in Sherman Oaks, had relatively a normal upbringing, so to speak, with all that kind of in the background. But I know, like, you grew up in Montecito. It took you a while to understand your family dynamics. And so I feel like that's where our lives kind of, even just growing up, we had similar things that we had to deal with.
Yeah, it was very hard for me when I was young because kids would bring magazines to school where my dad's, you know, affairs were talked about or things like that. And I would take it home to my mom and go, "Mom, what's this?" And she would just burst out crying and she really tried to shield me from all that as long as she could. But I think you're right. Even now, it's hard to answer questions about my family because it's not my business. Like I really respect people's privacy and I take that very seriously. And I can't sit here and divulge about my dad or my uncle. I'm not gonna get into it. It's their business, you know, and our relationships are tricky at times. And yeah, the questions are really tough to come to an understanding of how to get through it. I think you're right. And for me, that started around the time I was 12. That's when my dad went back to work with the Eagles, and life changed for me when that happened. It was pretty shocking to me. And it's interesting, people know, like you're mentioning the families. I want to ask like how you were introduced to me at first, because when I was told who you were, it was in the same sentence as he's related to Elvis. And before I ever met you, but I knew of you, and what had been said was, you know, that's Kash, he's related to Elvis. And I'm wondering, you know, I'm sure it's a thing, right? It's a thing where
And I know who you're talking about, who said that, because that was definitely, I mean, that person would always introduce me that way to people, or I would even if they said it when I was around or not. But no, I do know that. Oh, this is Lucy. I know we had some mutual friends who were getting ready to perform, and then she mentioned your dad, like, oh, she's, you know, Joe Walsh
right?
from Eagles.
It's
Oh
like
yeah,
they know who you are before you walk in the room. And I think that for me, because I don't like you and we don't think like that,
yeah,
people in that situation, like a public figure. You forget all that stuff and you're just a human.
yeah.
And so I think it's caused me to get really burned and sideswiped a lot because I've been a bit naive about it and unassuming of people's agendas. But that's taken me a long time to learn about how to spot the red flags when somebody's like interested in who you are instead of you as a person. Would you say you've gotten better at spotting it earlier?
Oh, absolutely. And again, like I felt like, well, I think in my case, because again, like, so I'm around the time I'm 8, all that's happening, and it's because of accusations against Michael. I'm 8 or 9 when I met him. I met him once, so
That
I meet.
must have
Oh
been
yeah.
a shit show.
Oh, totally. And then so like I met him one time, but then it's still the connection, you know, it's still like, I mean, I had one experience. It was a family of like, it was family Easter. It was totally, he was fun. I had a good memory, but so much of the chaos that was his life and family members of mine's lives, as we know, it's like that was always like I'm dealing with a lot of that, you know, in a personal family situation. Public has a certain idea of that, and then so then when you meet people, they come in with preconceived notion of who you are. And it took me a real long time, and I felt like there was some independence a little bit in middle school. I was really kind of finding my way, and I did feel like, because with me, like I said, I was drawing and I liked building, and then acting was just because I liked movies, or I feel like I just understood. I would just watch movies by myself. I would get inspired, and I was thinking of characters I wanted to do, and then I started pursuing that more. You know, around 13, 14, and then around 14, 15 is around the time I actually started, like Lisa would take me to like parties with, you know, some of her friends. And at the time there was, you know, her album was getting ready to come out. So I got exposed to like a lot of like Hollywood stuff when I was like in my mid-teens, but like I still like went to school. I got my education because my parents were very adamant about that. And you know, I mean, I worked other jobs too, you know, like I did construction with my grandfather, and you know, even just being in, yeah, you know, we did, you know. And then but yeah, I did feel like even in certain circles you have to kind of present a certain thing where it's like, oh, you know, everyone expects you to be an actor, a musician, or like my cousin Benjamin, who's no longer with us, because of his direct lineage to Elvis, there was this expectation that he had to be a singer, and really he was like all about computers. And I know that was something me and him talked about many times, where we deal with people's ideas of us as opposed to what we really wanted to be in life.
That's right. I mean, but the good thing about having experienced that for me is it all brought me to the point of writing a book about what it means to be human, because growing up in the fame is the perfect learning ground to really see that it's all smoke and mirrors. And just because you're famous doesn't mean you're any different from the bum on the corner on a human level. See that firsthand. So it's all been for a good reason.
I did want to address too, like with the environment that my cousin was in at the time, and even certain family members. I know you had recently come out in the last 2 years, and we have a mutual friend who I interviewed around this time last year about an acting class that you had been involved in. This was reported in the Hollywood Reporter, and you've been vocal about your experiences there and dealing with narcissistic personalities in the industry. And before we dive into that, I just want to say I've read the article and I've seen interviews that you've given, and I've been exposed to so many of the same characters where people use certain techniques to just manipulate you, to goad you into being something that you're not. And I just really commend you for what you've been through and for sharing that experience with us.
Thank you. Yeah, it was what we're talking about is my time at the Gloria Gifford Conservatory. And she's an acting teacher, posing as an acting teacher, but she is in fact a very, a narcissistic abuser, and her class, her conservatory is a high control group, and it's all under the umbrella of Scientology. So I was there for 10 years, and you and I have a mutual friend who's still there, unfortunately. And when I escaped, and I do call it an escape because it was a life or death situation for me, it took me a while to realize what had happened to me. I was still in agreement with the narcissist. I was still believing everything that had been hammered into me for those 10 years. I was very, I needed to do some healing before I started to wake up and go, okay, well, what the fuck happened? And what am I going to do with this? And I'm sure you've been through the same thing. Everybody has, where, like I said in a recent post, you go between wanting to like devote your life to advocating for fellow victims and like saving everyone from this and stopping that abuser. And then other days you're like, I don't care anymore. I never want to think about this again. I just want to wipe the slate clean and move on. So I go between those two extremes, and that's really tricky. But I've allowed myself the grace to let it go if I want for like a couple months, 6 months, a year. And then if I want to speak up and give an interview, I will. And it doesn't have to be black and white, it's a lifelong process to heal and recover and thrive after such intense abuse for such a prolonged period of time. So just giving myself the grace to be human and speak about it when I feel inspired. The other thing about speaking out that's really, really difficult is you never feel like you've said enough about what happened. Like, you could talk about it for 100 years, and there's so much to say that when you're trying to be specific about it, it's very challenging. And you walk away from the interview going, God, I should have said this, and I forgot about this, and this needs to be addressed. And that's a tough one for me. And every time I give an interview, like one just came out a couple days ago, I go through this real emotional hangover where I'm really just back in it and feeling all that shame about what happened and how could I have let that happen, and embarrassment, because it's very embarrassing to talk about a lot of these things. It's very embarrassing to speak up about abuse. I know everybody struggles with that. And I think the most important thing is not judging each other as like them versus me, like, oh, I would never let that happen. Oh, I'm not like that. They must be an idiot or whatever. To get rid of that, because abuse is a very insidious thing. And just because you didn't experience it the way I did, I guarantee somewhere in your life, you've felt the same, you've been under the same things. And so that's where I'm at with it. It's a long process of healing.
And no, and I really commend you for that. And I did watch that particular interview. So I really wanted to validate your just your strength, how you've always known who you are. For me, watching that, the things that you say, boom, lights go on because I've been in those situations. I've been with those types of people, like where I came from, at 14, 15, I literally became an adult. Like I still went to school and stuff, but I was in an adult world with a lot of people in the industry being exposed to a lot. So I really didn't, those formative years when you're supposed to develop relationships, like I didn't have that. You get sucked into things and it becomes your reality. So for me, it was like I was in a similar environment that you were in. There's people kind of having agendas for wanting to take me places or wanting to do a favor for me. Alcohol was introduced to me at a young age, like it was allowed because, oh, he looks of age, he can handle it, but it can take you down some dark paths as well too if you're just a kid without any real guidance and you're looking for an escape. I'm like struggling, like working full time. My parents were going through a divorce. My brother was going through some stuff, and there was all this family stuff. And I ended up having an arrhythmia, and I was dead for just under a minute. I
Oh
died at the
God.
gym. And what you said about the anxiety and trauma, it's like that's so much because they couldn't find anything medically wrong with me. I was fortunate to come
Right.
back to life, but it's something that I struggled with a lot of those years in my life. That was a red flag to me. And I came back after the surgery. I was like, you know what? I'm having a new outlook on life. And in my
Yeah.
20s, up until the time I think I met you, I was, it was really like picking up those pieces, having relationships, but the same environment was still present, not as much as it was. And I'd learned a lot. And then right around the time I met you, that was when the environment was starting to turn on me. And it was just interesting. You were in that class dealing with certain people, and I was dealing with, even it's just surreal too, even after talking to Abigail last year too, like, whoa, I had no, and I'd been to a few of the plays. Abigail had invited me. And so we had people in the same universe in our worlds. But then at that time, I was really starting to make a name for myself. I wanted to I felt like every time I tried to do something on my own, there was always this shadow, like the family legacy, so to speak, was people still only perceive me. So, and it was just getting to a point, I was getting gaslighted, I was getting manipulated, and I said no more. And you know what? I booked 2 movies. I started my own thing, and for like a decade, I've just been me, and I've just been happier.
You said that you admire how I've always known who I am. And I gotta say, I haven't always known who I am, which is what made me susceptible to a narcissist. They prey on people who are hungry for love and validation. And what I learned through that situation, and I'm grateful I went through it, even though it's cost me a lot of things and cost me 10 years of my life. Uh, I know who I am now, and I am not hungry for validation. I'm very at peace with who I am and what I want out of life. And I never had that before. And it took going through that abuse to arrive at that. So it was very it was very educational. And that's how I like to speak about it now. I like to speak about it in a way where I can educate people about what narcissistic abuse actually is. It's a very misunderstood term. And yeah, but what you're saying, I can't believe you came to some of our shows. Let me ask you, what did you feel when you were there when you were in Gloria's space? What did you feel? Did you feel any vibes that were off, or did it just seem normal? Because
Okay,
everybody's hiding it so well in that situation. It's all about hiding it from the public.
okay, so so Abigail and we have a mutual friend, Abigail Kachunas, great actress, great human. We were actually working on a pilot together with a mutual friend from WME. And so we were on set, and she was supposed to be like this diva character, and I was this like poser rocker kind of character. And so anyway, we had a good time. We exchanged information. She invited me to one of the plays. And then I went, and then I realized we had another friend who I knew through WME was there. So the first play, I remember just kind of being funny and laugh. Then I got invited a little bit later, and I just remember like there was sections roped. This is the only quote unquote thing at the time, maybe, but it was just I remembered she was sitting in the back. The instructor was sitting in the back, just kind of observing, and me and my friend walked in and we grabbed a seat, and it was just kind of like, you can't sit here. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll just go around to this. And that was like, people were, and it wasn't like any VIPs were coming in, I guess it was part of the show, but there was nothing, but it was just kind of like, okay, we kind of paid to come and support you, but whatever. And that was, I guess, looking back and looking at certain posts that were said at the time, and having known you and really having deeper conversations with Abigail the last year, a lot of just posts or things that make sense now.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does make sense when you piece it all together. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the overall feedback of the industry, because when the Hollywood Reporter came out, everybody read it, obviously, and I was contacted by so many producers and casting directors and industry people who were like, I knew it. I could never figure out what was going on, but I knew it. And it's like, yeah, but nobody speaks up.
Yeah.
Because we live in this climate of not speaking up, of bystander apathy. We really do, in many ways.
That is another thing you understand. And it's, gosh, and it really coincided, like this story that you had, it coincided with so much. Because even like when I was getting exposed, gaslighted, up till my arrhythmia, there were friends that I had in, that group I'm telling you about. And there was a lot of dysfunction. For whatever reason, I was starting to feel sick inside. And like 2 of them died within the span of a year. 2 people who had, it was an abusive, not good relationship, and they both died. A childhood best friend of mine who took a different turn died. And then I died, but I came back. And it was just so that for me, that was the whole thing in itself. But it was just so hard for me to like drive by certain parts of LA. It was like reminding me of certain things. And then the interesting thing with me that happened was, like I said, the last 10 years was just all about me soul searching. I even if something came up about extended family, I would address it and move on. But I was just never, I'm like, I'm not going to be labeled as anything like that. I'm just myself. And then things started to happen, with obviously Ben's tragedy. And then there was, people reaching out again that I didn't want, that I know contributed to his demise, that I didn't want anything to do with. And then it was surreal, because even when the Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie came out, there had been some stuff going on in the inner circles, which is public knowledge now. And for me, it was like I had no real desire to watch that movie, because I knew what was happening behind closed doors, and I just didn't, want to go back and invite that back into my life. And then it's mid-January, so a little bit around this time last year, I get invited to a screening through a mutual friend who did not know the family connection. I got to meet Austin, very nice guy. And then 2 days later, he wins. Abigail came on my show the next day, and we're talking, and we had been talking for a bit, and I opened up about like everything about my child and everything. The very next day, Lisa died. And it was, whoa. And then a week later, I'm like in Memphis, and I'm with so many people from the past, and it was like gathering closure. And so last year became as tragedy as it was. There was a lot that I had to deal with, but there were some wounds that needed healing. I've been in communication with different people who are out now, who had their own struggles, and it's nice to really kind of like, wow, we were going through this at this time, and that's why it was hard to have a relationship, or I was dealing with this. There was some much needed healing that needed to be done. And then there was also someone in that group who publicly was doing things behind closed doors, and it was because I was a kid at the time of these things, but was just sentenced to go to jail for 30 years now. And just knowing like I was in his house at a certain time, now I know the identities of these women who made these accusations, and I'm like, holy cow. I mean, I'm like a kid, and it was strange, and I'm not like wishing anyone's demise or anything, but it really was like, wow, just being a kid, you're exposed to this, you knew something was wrong, but I never pictured it to be that. And so for me, and there was this closure, like, wow, I mean, there was something else going on, and the darker forces that were around. And the more that I went down and saw what was happening, it does parallel to what you're talking about being in that similar environment, using certain terminology for manipulative purposes, and how narcissists prevail, or they did until they got exposed. So I just
they will always prevail. That's what I've learned. They will always prevail, and there will always be hungry people who are taken. And if they stay there and rot with the narcissist for the rest of their life, enjoy, but you can't save everyone. So I've stopped trying to save save people.
Well, us being here and sharing our story, I feel like we've, and again, I'm not trying to influence anyone's ideas. It's like, I feel like, go out and do your thing, but we have stories to tell. And I think sharing our experiences is helping people. And I feel like you, even so, getting to your book now, I mean, and this is such a fascinating story too, because these were the letters that your grandfather wrote to your grandmother during World War II. And before you really had a time to sit down, and when you found these letters, you wanted to talk to him, but he had, and I say this because, I got to spend time with both my grandmothers during the pandemic. Like I grew up around them, had great relationships, but I really got to, they were dealing with Alzheimer's as well too. They were in their
Yeah.
90s. And
Oh,
so I
both of
understand
them?
both of that. Well, yeah, I mean, they were in their late 90s. So it was, I mean, well, my mom's mom had like full on Alzheimer's, but my dad's mom had like evening Alzheimer's, and which was something that they were, just because I take them to their appointments and spend time with them during the day,
Right.
but at night. But so anyway, you were able to find these letters, and you were able to speak with your. So I mean, this is just such a fascinating story in itself. So you speak to your grandmother for 3 days, getting the interview, and then she's no longer with us. She passed away 4 days later. But you had that moment to really dive in and write this book.
Yeah, I mean, here's one of the letters that my grandfather wrote in 1944. This is on New Year's Eve, 1944. So I have 63 of these incredible letters, and I always knew that I wanted to turn them into a film, but I was only 17 and I didn't know how to do that yet. So I just started interviewing my grandparents to collect their answers for later when I could figure out how to turn it all into a film and somehow get Ron Howard involved. That was my dream. And then my grandfather died of Alzheimer's, and I really didn't get a chance to ask him anything. So it's really strange to have experienced him die of that way, which took 7 years, and then know the voice of him in his 20s and 30s, like to know the young, vibrant man so well in my head because of his letters, but never to have known that side of him in life was really an extraordinary thing. And that all led me to interviewing my grandmother in her nursing home when she was 97. And I filmed it. I'm going to make a documentary out of it. And she was gone very soon after. So this book is the story of those 3 final days that I spent with Wanda Mae Boyer. And what started out as asking questions about the letters really became this master class in what it means to be human and to embrace our humanity, knowing that we're going to die. That takes courage. That takes courage. And we're all trying to figure out how to do that. So I think this book is a very timely read at this time when technology and AI and social media are stealing our humanity from us and isolating us from each other. I think it's incredibly important that we stand for nurturing the human connection instead of turning away from it. That's what I hope this book inspires.
No, I hope so too, and I really agree with you about the AI, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, even early on with social media. I mean, social media, I think for us, because we've seen the evolution of it since, whether we're around the same age, so we know when, Facebook came out, and then Instagram. I think I met you right around when Instagram was happening, and it was like, oh, you just post a picture of what you're doing, and now it's become such this marketing tool, and everyone's filtering.
Yeah.
And so and I understand it. I mean, I've been on, the PR side as well as the performer side, and I understand in business senses, but I really try to be more careful now as I've gotten, just
Yeah.
more people look at what I do, and then you look at this other generation, they grow up with it being the norm. So
I
it's
know.
just, with us, it's like, remember when you would just call someone on the phone and have a conversation. Now it's like everyone's like these kids are growing up and their lives are on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And it's,
There's 2 things about it, and then I want to say something about the scientific side of it. It's a double-edged sword. social media. On one hand, I really like it. I love using Instagram to, connect with people one-on-one. I have met and connected with some of my idols around the world, and not just my idols, but people all over the world. For that, I love it. I really, really love the connectivity of social media. And the other side of that coin is that, like you just said, it makes you far more visible than you ever were before. And there's a lot of very strange people that have access to you in a way that's new for all of us. And I always try to keep that in mind. And then as far as children who are growing up addicted to it now, that's the unfortunate and very scary part of it, is that our brains are actually addicted to the chemicals that are released when we check in there and see who likes us or not. And unfortunately, I fall prey to that too. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I have to fight myself not to open Instagram because my brain is so addicted to that. And on that level, it's very disturbing what's happening. And it's very, very detrimental to our health. And I think we're going to see the effects of that as these generations get older, ours, and the youngers.
Definitely. And even because what you're saying about your book is that human connection. And like my grandparents were present throughout. I mean, I was very fortunate to have my grandparents into my adult life. They all lived to be in their 90s. And it's after they're gone, it's you remember those conversations you had, or you remember those stories. And there's more that I learn about them now. Just, even like my dad will open up, or it's interesting, those dynamics where all of a sudden, like, wow, I didn't know that about my grandfather. Oh, I didn't know
Right.
that there was this, or about, me and my dad have had deeper conversations the older we get. And so it's really having that human element to it. And I feel, and I have read a story, we're going to be more, because we're entering a new phase in civilization and technology and just humanity, and we're going to end up like our generation is going to be more like our grandparents' generation, is what I'm like. We're kind of paving the way for what's to come. So I feel like we even with your book and where we both are in our lives, we're like, okay, we're going to be that blueprint for the new generations.
It's true. I'm glad that you and your dad are learning more about each other uh, as you get older. That is the overwhelming feedback I've had from people who have read the book so far. Just, oh my God, I never got the chance to ask my grandfather about this, or I never knew that about my mother. And this book is making me want to ask more questions of my loved ones while they're still here. Because as you know, they go in a second and all their memories and all their stories are gone forever. And if you didn't find out about it, you never will. And we take each other for granted, and we take time for granted. So don't take it for granted. Ask each other now. Get more curious. Curiosity is everything. And I can't tell you how many conversations I have where the other person doesn't ask me a single question about myself. It's not okay. Curiosity is everything. It's what makes us human. So get back in touch with it, because that's what's being robbed from us by everything becoming so easy and instant with the advancement of technology. It robs us of our curiosity.
Well put. I mean, I have to remind myself every day too. And even you did mention something in another interview where we feel like we put that pressure on ourselves. We don't feel like we deserve a good walk in the park or going to the beach. And it's really getting back in touch. Like I have to remind myself too, I can be editing or doing something in the studio. It's like, no, Cash, you need to get up, you need to breathe some fresh air, take a walk, get a coffee. And it's and do have those healthy outlets. And I mean, gosh, I
Yeah.
mean, Lucy, I feel like you and we could probably just talk all day. We have so many parallels. I'm just really so happy to have you on the show. The way that you've been so open, I feel like, you're someone who I've always admired. And just to really see you be so open with the stuff that you've dealt with, and to see you succeed so well in your career, I'm just so proud of you. I'm so happy for you. And I'm so stoked that you have this new book coming out, and that these new career endeavors you have. Is there anything else that you would like to share with your audience?
Thank you, Cash. That means a lot. Your beautiful words are very appreciated. And I feel the same about you. I've always admired you and just wished you the best. I would like to share that I just partnered with an organization because my book takes place in my grandmother's nursing home. It's a big part of the story, that setting. And I write a lot about what I experienced there in the elderly population, which is a lot of neglect, a lot of loneliness. And I just partnered with an organization called the National Association of Long-Term Care Volunteers. The National Association of Long-Term Care Volunteers. It's a mouthful, but what they do on a national level is they help bring volunteer companions into nursing homes to spend time with the elderly that live there. And anybody can get involved. It's a very easy training online, and you can show up at the nursing home at the bottom of your road in your community and ask to volunteer an hour of your time to sit with someone and play cards or talk or play music, whatever you can give. It really makes a huge difference for people's quality of life. And we're all going to be there someday in some way. So I think it's a very ignored part of society that we don't really like to look at because we don't like to think about our mortality. But to me, it's very important to take a look at, and it's a big part of what my book's about. So I would urge everybody listening, please get involved if you feel called. Their website is naltcv.org, and you can always check in with me on socials if you want more information. I'm the Lucy Walsh. You can follow me and learn more about getting involved.
I love it. And also, did I hear that you have a new podcast that you're going to be launching as well with that it's kind of themed with your book about reading letters from grandparents?
I am, yeah, not just grandparents, but
Or, yeah.
all kinds of letters and artifacts we have in our families. We all have letters from the wars that our ancestors fought in, or in times of peace as well. We all have these special family documents. And I am going to be starting a podcast in the near future where I invite guests every week to share theirs, because there is an incredible story inside each and every human on the planet. And sharing those stories is how we help each other. So I'm very excited about that project.
I can't wait. What don't you do, Lucy? Hats
Well,
off
I
to you.
can't do a cartwheel. Can't do a
Well,
cartwheel for the life of me.
I did this stunt training class just before the pandemic. I couldn't do a cartwheel to save my life. And then they put me in the harness, and I was like trying to do this front flip, and I was like, my
A
legs.
harness?
Oh yeah, no, you can like be a Marvel character for like a day. It's like it's so fun to do this stunt training class with wire fighters. They teach you, because I did martial arts growing up, but this is like a whole other thing. You do stunt choreography, and so you got to jump and fly and stuff. So I mean, I couldn't do the front flip to save my life. Like, Cash, just do a backflip. I'm like, no way. And then, I let it go. I couldn't do a cartwheel at the beginning, and I ended up doing backflips the rest of the afternoon. So
Oh my
you
God.
got it in you. We'll do stunt training next time
In
you're
a
in LA.
harness? You did backflips in the harness?
In the harness with a sword too, not a real sword, but a prop sword.
Is there video footage of this?
Oh yeah,
I have to see this. Yeah.
I'm really proud of you, and anytime you want to come back and tell me what's going on in your life, I know you and I could probably just go up and down, find a theme that we're doing, and you always continue to amaze me too, even when I just check in and see what you like. Just something will pop in, and like a reel or something, and you just say something that stays in my head for a minute and allows me to evaluate. And I think you really do that with your work.
That's the biggest compliment I could ever get. If I can help or, change, I don't know, one other person's mindset, then that's a successful life to me. And that's what we're all here to help each other do. Yeah, so the book's out March 12th. Everywhere you get books, ask for it in the bookstores. You can order it on Amazon. It'll be everywhere books are sold March 12th. Remember Me as Human. And I am so grateful you had me, Cash. It's so good to see your face. I can't wait to hug you in person soon.
Definitely. No, we're due for that. Let me know when you're in LA. We're gonna keep it going. Lucy, you rock. Love you. I'm so proud of you. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Love you too. Lots of love. Mwah.